This is the second day of Dr. Lewis's testimony, and I thought I'd take a look. You guys are telling me that it gets better or worse. So let's go.
In your book, you mentioned that oftentimes people can act out multi-personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder. And there's been several movies that kind of portray that. Do you recall talking about that?
No, but I'm aware that there are movies such as, I think, Sybil and others like that where this has been.
She just ignored the central part of what he was saying. His point is about acting out, and she just ignored that and went on about the movie.
Done, and more recently in movies.
Have you worked with any actors and helping them in their roles in movies?
No, I don't. Wait 1 moment. In their roles in dissociation?
Yes. Cape Fear, Robert De Niro?
I have assisted Robert De Niro in, I don't think it had to do with DID. I think it had to do with a different movie that he was making that where I agreed to assist them, but I don't believe it had to do with DID.
Had to do with him being a psychopath?
It had to do with his being a very dangerous guy.
And that's the movie Cape Fear, where he's a murderer and he has an urge to kill and things like that.
Why didn't she just say yes? Is she avoiding the word psychopath? I mean, it's not in the DSM, but just interesting.
Don't know all the details of the movie, but
right.
Is that a fair summary of it?
I don't know. There is a better one earlier than his that is a far better Cape Fear.
The original.
I did assist him in it, and he did.
What a redirect. So they're talking about whether or not she's assisted actors, because he's on this thing about people faking DID, which has happened. And this defendant has every reason to do that, and she's faked a lot of other things. It's obvious where he's going. So he brings up her coaching people on how to act, and she, unintentionally or intentionally misses the point. And now she's talking about another movie that Robert De Niro was not in. Like,
I did give him access to some tapes that we had of people with different kinds of disorders.
Did they include dissociated identity disorder?
Among them, there were some that did, some that didn't. Yes.
So how do you tell if someone's acting and they want you to believe that they have multi-personalities?
Well, I can tell you what I do.
Tell us, please.
Okay. What I like to do is be able to show that there were unmistakable signs of these kinds of switches, changes, different states, different abilities to function long before I was ever asked to be involved in
unmistakable signs. Well, if there were unmistakable signs in this case, we would have seen them. We would have heard about them. The defense would have been eager to get them out there. It's the fact that it's so debatable shows us it's not unmistakable, and certainly not before the time of the crime.
Any case.
Wow.
And so that is one of the best ways. I think that's the best way. It's that, to my mind, if I'm teaching, I will say to students, this is as close as you get to an MRI in this field where you have something that was done. And again, I repeat, you can't retrospectively malinger. You can't write your name in a funny way or pretend to be somebody when you're 18, because when you're 35, you're planning to kill someone and you think you need a good excuse. That makes no sense. So that it's important for me and
She's correct. Letecia can't go back in time and retrospectively malinger. Um, so she's proving the prosecution side here.
for the people with whom I work to be able to, well, identify in any number of ways whether these signs, symptoms, behaviors antedated any difficulty with the law or any current issue.
Sure. Things like family members coming in and saying, God, she didn't remember my name for long periods of time, or she blacked out and couldn't remember where she was at.
What are you referring to now? Who?
For signs of dissociative identity disorder, retroactive.
No, that
Wouldn't mean anything to you?
well, that alone, no, that's very little bit. However,
So he's coming up with a major sign, an obvious sign that's easily explainable to lay people. And she says even that's not enough. Yet, as far as we know, the only thing that she has to base her opinion on is Letecia's self-reports and her act long after she's incarcerated. She's come up with everything under, Letecia's come up with everything under the sun to get away with this and never claimed DID, actually denied having any kind of mental illness except perhaps anxiety.
if you let's say you're looking through somebody's work and you're looking through their high school notebooks, or you're looking through early pictures,
I bet you if Letecia could, she would have somebody produce an old notebook and claim it's hers.
signatures, things of that nature, and that these things way antedated any problematic behaviors later on, that any legal issues. That is the kind of thing where well, we've found, for example, in the workbooks of children at school, where we've gone through them and we have found a different name that was used, and that was used at different times.
And so if I could, Dr. Lewis, you're saying that the writing would be more important than an individual saying, I blacked out for long periods of times. I have no recollection of what happened, and there's no explanation of.
I'm sorry.
Cell phones off, please. That's your cell phone, Dr. Lewis?
I think it might be, I can
Okay.
assist.
Anybody who works in a court knows to turn their cell phone off before they arrive. In some places, just turning it on vibrate isn't enough, and you're going to get in crap if you. That's funny. The expert witness's cell phone is going off.
Right.
So is it more important to you to look at someone's prior handwritings than evidence of someone saying they had blackout periods and couldn't remember where they were at, and they couldn't remember their loved ones' names and things like that?
Your second examples just don't ring true, because it just is not something that people tend to tell me. And you can't measure this versus that. Often there have to be several things and combinations of signs, symptoms, behaviors. Uh, what
Just remembering, she says there has to be several things.
is particularly useful is whether acquaintances or family members or people who have known the person over time have said, gee, when this person was such and such an age, he or she insisted on being called this and acted differently and did different things, so that
Didn't she earlier say that family members were unreliable? In any case, in this case, she has not interviewed any family members.
it's one, it's a piece of data. And, but that in and of itself, there is no single thing that you look for. But at least in the cases where we have felt that we were dealing with the real thing, there have been multiple pieces of evidence that at earlier times, for example, I noticed in some of my notes about Letecia that someone had said when she was younger, and I forgot this yesterday, when she was younger, she asked to be called Maria. And I had forgotten that
Can
yesterday.
you point me out where you
I thought she did an interview. So who's someone? Let's see.
found that information?
I'd have to look through all of this, but I can later if you like. I'll find it for you. It's just a note that I took because I thought it was interesting.
But what was it in an interview, or where did you get that note?
All right. She doesn't know where the note is or what it's about. If you're going to say, I understand that there's a big volume of information and it's hard to keep track of every little piece of information, like which piece of paper it belongs to. But if you're going to get on this stand and say something to the court, you better have that piece of paper to back up what you're saying. You can't just blah blah something. Oh, somebody said something without something to back that up. So the fact that she doesn't have the piece of paper that she has to look for it is troublesome.
As I say, rather than take up the time of the court and look through all of this, I will find it for you. But I just noticed it in the past maybe several hours or so, and I can find it for you because.
Well, here's the deal. I only have a X
Yes.
amount of time to talk to you.
Right, yes,
And so I can't really let this linger around because it's
Yeah.
pretty significant.
I think so, yes.
Oh, this is painful.
I'm sorry, I can tell you though that I came upon it in the past maybe 12 hours or so.
Well, do you know if it's something that the defendant told you?
No, it was not. That's what was interesting, that I had completely forgotten this, but I saw that someone who had been interviewed said when she was a child, at times she asked to be called Maria. That in and of itself is not a proof of anything.
Okay. Two things right there jump out at me. First, someone who was interviewed. Interviewed by whom? When? Could it be, if she's not remembering, it can be anything, right? So could it be that Letecia told another interviewer, oh yeah, ask my brother, because she does this absent proof thing. So Letecia could do, oh yeah, ask my brother or ask my whoever that I used to ask to be called Maria, because they'll tell you that. And so the interviewer might have written that in their notes. Then Dr. Lewis reads it and thinks, or mistakenly remembers now, because obviously she's not remembering clearly, and thinks, oh, somebody said this. So like this could have come from any avenue. Without the evidence, we don't know. And then the other thing she says here is, well, but that's not even enough. So,
But it's a confirmation if you have a lot of other things that go along with it.
Well, it's certainly not in any.
Again, these are simply what I took and labeled Letecia notes from relatives. Can't tell you exactly who, but
okay, so she's trying to present as evidence a note she took. So what she's saying is something just like here, I'll jot down a thing as I'm watching. Could you imagine if I stood up in court and said, "Oh, look, I jotted down this thing because I thought it while I was looking at something else, and so now I want to make that evidence." You can't. Ah!
here it says Letecia called self Maria Sanchez as a young child. And I have a little explanation when saying retrospective malingering, because that, you don't do that. At 12, you don't call yourself Maria because later on you're expecting to do something where you're going to have to make some sort of excuse. So this is what one of her relatives had told us, that
Ooh,
that she called herself Maria Sanchez as a young child. This came as a surprise to me. I had not recalled it, but I was skimming it, and there it was.
who told who? What relative? And who did they tell? And when? And I mean, is it on a report? Is this told to somebody who told somebody who told somebody? Was this told a clinician, told a police officer? Who? Like,
And Dr. Lewis, you've testified hundreds of times, and you know that you need to turn over your notes and everything you rely on as an expert to the prosecution, don't you?
yep.
Is that a question?
Yes, it is.
No, when
You have
I,
obligations as an expert to turn over all the information that you use in formulating your opinions, correct?
well, when I am sitting taking notes over different things, I do not necessarily even keep everything. I jot down something that I think may be important later, and I notice that I jotted this down.
If it was so yeah, you do take notes and you write down a single word or something to remind you to look at something later, to look at, oh gee, I want to go back and look at this other report, or I want to check dates or something. If it was so important, then why, at the time she was writing her report, did she not include that? If it was so important, why did she just write just a little note instead of writing a more fulsome comment or including it as a supplementary report or something else? If it was that important, she should have done something with it, and she didn't. So perhaps at the time she discovered it wasn't reliable, or it wasn't true, and now she's forgotten.
It's so important that you found out about it last night. You came in and decided to tell the jury about it today. Is that correct?
I came upon it last night, I believe before this morning, yes.
It's so important you made an effort to put it in your report that you knew that the prosecution was going to get. Is
No.
that correct?
No, it is not. I sat when I was going over notes, trying to pull together things ages ago, and jotted that down because I thought, gee, that's odd. She had just mentioned Maria to me very recently, and somebody had said this. When I wrote down L called self Maria as a young child, if I thought I was going to have to prove this particular statement to someone, I would have written down who said it or whatever. I was pulling together my.
Why wouldn't you think you had to prove that? This is what this case is about. Whether or not she had dissociative identity disorder in the first place, and then whether or not that led to a psychotic break at the time of the crime. Because DID doesn't make you insane. It doesn't mean you're not responsible for criminal acts. Most people with that disorder don't go around killing people.
Thoughts at the time, and going through and seeing what kinds of things seem to matter. And it is a note taken while I was going through hundreds of pages of notes, and to my surprise, this appeared. And I had no memory of having seen it before until I looked at it, skimming through it, and found it in the past, I would say, 12 hours or so.
It was until you realized you had nothing to corroborate your diagnosis, that she was Maria Sanchez, and you needed to come up with something. Is that right?
No, it was
Why
written.
wasn't that in your report, doctor? If it was that significant, if that's the only corroboration you have, why is it not in your report?
It is not the only corroboration that we have, sir. This is
We're still waiting to hear the other corroboration.
this is an observation as you go through hundreds of pages of notes and you see something there that you hadn't expected. And so I'll jot it down and think, gee, that's kind of interesting. But there are many other pieces of evidence that there were other times that that she apparently used other names and that she signed differently. But for example, there are notes where there are different names, but if you really study them, it turns out they were her names. They were.
She just said two opposing things. He's asking for. She's saying, "Oh, well, there is corroboration because she used different names before," and but then then she says, "Oh, it turns out they were her names." And different signatures. This woman, Letecia, has a history of running and hiding and lying. So, in the circles I travel in, that's called an alias.
Before she was married, or when she was married to one person, then to another, and I will write them down because what at first may look as if, gee, why is there this name? Did she use that? And then you're an idiot if you say, oh yeah, she was in an altered state, when no, she was in an unmarried state, or she was married to a different person. So that when I'm going through things, I'll jot something down. I happened to jot this down because I thought, how come that early? I don't think I became aware of the Maria character until I had interviewed her.
Yeah, that's
So even the doctor who keeps saying you need more than one thing, you need unmistakable evidence that all these signs predated contact with the doctor, predated the offense. They had to be present at the time of the offense. And now she's saying this. I don't know, for all her efforts, she's trying really hard to be on this side because she thinks their side. She's trying really hard to be on the side of the defense because they're paying her. But she's testifying for the prosecution right now.
that's when everyone became aware of it.
Well,
The
here,
significant view
yeah.
that family members, including her daughter, Harvey Hunt, her husband, Al Stout, had never seen any signs or any evidence that she had different personalities.
I can't comment on that because people's ability to recognize things, the ways the ways things are asked make a difference. So I can't in general say, yes, this matters. No, it does not. This is interesting.
Well,
Somebody knows.
before you go off on another tangent,
hold on a second. Which is it? It's really important to hear from family. Or is it they're unreliable and biased? Or is it, yeah, these family members saying this would be really important? Or now it's, well, they might not recognize it, so it's not as important as you think. I mean, I understand that things are nuanced. Um, and when you have a depth of knowledge in an area, it there are nuances that people who don't study the thing aren't gonna necessarily pick up on. But she's testified a lot of times in court. I mean, you would think that she would be a little more clear. And right now it's sounding like, no, I want to make it so that I can choose the signs and symptoms or the evidence or interpret the evidence to mean what I want it to mean. That's what this is sounding like. I'm not saying that is what she's doing. I don't know what's in her head. But yeah, wow.
Let me finish my question, okay? You consider that there was no evidence by family members that she had no patients that she had disassociative.
That specifically, I did not think about that specifically because different personas are either recognized differently because of the sensitivity of the observer, or they don't occur in that setting, and they occur in another setting.
And it doesn't help your diagnosis of a dissociative identity disorder, correct? Is that why you don't consider it?
No, it's interesting that they did not notice this. It may even be one of them who said this, who said, no, I never noticed anything different. And yet, one of these people said
I
that
think we got
she
what your
called
note
herself
says,
that.
doctor. Okay.
Well, that could well be one of the people who said, I never noticed she was different, but, oh, geez, some
It's a note that she made while reviewing things. And well, it could very well be this, or it could very well be that. It could very well be UFOs and aliens. It could be anything you want to make up, because no one can prove anything.
sometimes she called herself Maria, so that you're open to whatever comes your way. You try to jot down what seems important, and then you try to pull it together later. But there is no one thing that will say, oh, yes, this person suffers from DID or does not. There's a whole constellation of different things that you look at, that you consider, and
I'm just relating this back to my own field. In threat assessment, there is no one thing, usually. And it is a constellation, and it is how things are combined. We have heard none of that. There's nothing. And even the corollary interviews and the gathering of corroboration or something to, you also look for, okay, what will kill my theory? Is there evidence that I'm wrong? You have to look for that too. When you're talking about somebody on trial, you're talking about people's lives and their liberty. You can't just be willy-nilly and, well, maybe it means this, and not turning over every rock that you possibly can, because people's lives and their futures are on the line. And I'm gonna rant. I'm just gonna shut up. Sorry.
no one thing that matters.
Okay,
particular.
let's talk about something that matters to you that you put in your report, okay? You had Miss Stauch drew, I forget the name of the test where they draw the clock and they have to put the hands of the clock. What's the name of that test?
I don't know, I call it clock.
The MOCA, Montreal Cognitive Assessment.
We'll call it the clock test. Is that all right with you?
Yeah.
So you had her perform the clock test and she did horrible on it.
Well, she did something that I have seen before on with like older patients who have been
It's interesting. Oh, maybe not. The MOCA is a screening for to show cognitive impairment or if there's a physiological problem in the brain. So yeah, I could see them screening. Yeah.
actually demented, and uh, I actually consulted Dr. Marikangas about it and others because it looks as though there is some kind of a defect in the ability to see certain areas. And so that everything was crowded into one area. And I have seen this in patients with dementia, and dementia can be caused by many different injuries. So that I was surprised. The other thing that is surprising is that I didn't know quite what to make of it. I knew there was something unusual, and I had asked her again, would you do this again? And she did a much better job of it. And then I remembered I jotted down L because when she had done something with her right hand, and then I hadn't asked her to change hands at that point, but I wondered, why are these different? And one with the left hand had been done one way, and with the right hand another way, so that she.
No. No. If you have something physiologically wrong with your brain, it doesn't correct itself in a minute. It doesn't. This is impossible. That's faking. But it sounds like the way she's describing it, she said a visual issue. Sometimes people after if they have a tumor or if they have a traumatic brain injury, they'll have like a left side neglect or right side neglect. And so when they draw the clock, they'll miss the numbers in one side or another. So I'm not sure if that's what they're talking about, but that kind of thing you can't be fixed in the next minute. It's physiological. It's it's like if you're blind and then you're not blind in the next minute, and it's and this makes no sense. It sounds to me like Letecia is faking, but here's the thing that's hilarious is she's faking on the wrong test. she's faking the wrong symptoms. Okay.
She functioned differently, and also she functioned differently at different times, which puzzles me. This is partly why I very much wanted to consult a neurologist, because I don't feel that I am familiar enough, skilled enough, trained enough to say this is the section of the optic area that I think is functioning differently at this time.
The MOCA is not just the clock. There's a whole bunch of other questions. There's animals on it, and I think counting backwards. So I don't know if they gave her the whole MOCA. It sounds like they didn't, because I betcha she would have. Oh, maybe I'm assuming too much. I just think that Letecia would have faked other things on the test too, and that would have shown up. But yeah, they just did the clock. And yeah, she probably should have had a neuropsych. Like if I saw that, I would be asking for a neurologist. I'd be asking for a full neuropsych because something is obviously wrong in the brain, and it's not a mental illness. It's not like a chemical thing. There's something actually damaged. Uh, but then it wouldn't just fix itself in the next minute.
But
Did the thought ever cross your mind that she could be faking it, just wanting to have you have the opinions you have? Pretty easy, right, to mess up the hands on the clock,
she
knowing.
didn't mess up the hands on the clock. She created one section of it. I didn't know until relatively recently that this was typical of certain people with brain dysfunction in certain areas. No, it did not occur to me that that was faking something, because
Why does she use a screening test without understanding what the results could point to? I don't understand that.
afterwards, when I said, would you repeat this? Would you do it again? That she did a better job on it. And this is still a puzzle to me. And if I had the proper consultation, I would have discussed it with neurologists.
It's not a puzzle. It's not, I can help her out right here. It's not a puzzle. You can help her out. Letecia's lying.
And tried to figure out, because the optic pathway is a very complicated pathway in the brain. It turns upside down, it moves back and forth, and a neurologist is far better equipped to say, this is where things seem to be going wrong.
Did you
no.
know that she had performed that test before?
I did not know whether she had or had not.
Had you reviewed the state hospital reports, both the competency evaluation and the insanity evaluations, correct?
I'm not sure at which point, but I'm not aware of having seen that. That was kind of my last minute thought. Is there anything I can do that might show me any neurologic dysfunction?
All right. So let's say she says she's not aware of having seen that. So let's say she went through volumes of information and forgot she saw that, because it can happen with that much information. I mean, that's why people work in teams, so the other guy can go, oh yeah, remember this thing. Anyway, so she does this clock thing, and Letecia does well, and she doesn't, Dr. Lewis doesn't understand this. It's puzzling. At that point, you would go back and say, she's seen other doctors, so let's see if they found anything like this. Let's see if there's evidence in any of their evaluations that might explain this. You would go back. You wouldn't just say, I don't remember seeing anything like that. So you would go back and look.
I understand that you want the jury to hear what you have to say, but if you can just focus on my question and just answer it, okay? Did you review any prior tests that Ms. Stauch took with regards to this clock test that you've been talking about?
I don't recall seeing another clock test at that time prior to what I had done, no.
Okay, if I can just have a second. For the clock test that Dr. Torres did.
I noticed Letecia doesn't have her face on the table.
See what she said, draw a clock 10 past, what is it, 10 past 11? No, it's
She's reading out the instructions on the mocha, on that portion of the mocha, and she sounds like she's reading it for the first time, but it always the instructions are always the same. It's always 10 past 11.
She did pretty good on that one, didn't she?
well, yeah, it's not 10 past 11 really, but it's, I have others where she did better with me. And it puzzled me that, at the time I said, would do it again. and do it again. And it did improve. And
I'm still boggled by the fact that she would administer a test that even she doesn't understand how to interpret. There are times where you would administer a test or a screening, and if it comes back a certain way, you say, okay, so now I have to pass this along to an expert because it's beyond me and they can further interpret or further test. It's so that she would just keep repeating the test over and over, and then say she's puzzled. I just, this is so weird.
I am puzzled by this phenomenon, and I can't explain it to you except
It's not a phenomenon. It's malingering.
it is unusual that that particular way of drawing it has been found in individuals with severe brain damage, actually.
Well, and when we're
and-
talking about insanity, doctor, we're talking about the time of the crime, correct?
We're talking about brain function.
And if there were indications of severe brain damage, because what she's saying is actually correct, that part, then where's the MRI? Where's the neuropsych? Right? That's a reason right there to demand that those things get done. That's reason right there. That's evidence to give to the court to say, look, this screening test showed significant brain injury, and so this is evidence that we need a neuropsych and we need an MRI so that the court could order that.
At the time of the crime, and
So a test that was taken closer to the time of the crime would be more accurate as to what the brain function was happening at the time of the crime. Is that correct?
not necessarily.
So brain functions change over time,
Yes,
like change after you plead not guilty by reason of insanity?
and before and during. I mean, it changed there. I was with her, and when she produced,
Again, she's giving a test and saying it's a screening tool, and she's saying she doesn't understand it. We're talking about there's a difference between brain function. I don't know how to explain this. We're talking about actual damage, right? So your brain can function differently. Let's say, today you didn't get any sleep, or, you get a day where you just do a lot of dumb things, or maybe I'm the only one who does that. I don't know. Or you get a day where you get really into that zone and flow. So you're functioning differently. But this test is looking at damage. So, like, if you break your arm, it's not better in 5 minutes from now. And just the same as when you injure the brain, it's not doesn't get better in a minute or 10 minutes or a day. In fact, you don't have the same kind of cells in your brain that you would have that go to heal a broken arm. And I'm off topic. I'm as bad as these people. Sorry.
this, that was kind of my last fling at seeing, is there any sign of organicity? And then afterwards, when I asked her to repeat it for me right then and there, she did a better job. And then I kind of looked and I marked that she had been using her left hand and then her right hand, or vice versa.
On
And,
purpose.
sure, it varied right then and there. And I can't pretend to tell you exactly why. I think that with the assistance of a neurologist.
In the United States, is what a prisoner signs out of the library and reads? Is that documented? Because it'd be interesting to know what Letecia read up on while she was in there.
Just, we
Let me ask you this. You know that she was examined 2 days after the crime for head injuries, correct?
I'm not aware of how she was examined or by whom then right after.
She technically she wasn't. She she was examined for bumps on her head or something that would corroborate her story, and they found nothing. Um, Head injury or brain injury is a different thing. You cannot have any mark at all on your head and have a significant brain injury.
The crime. I would have to look at it to, if I saw it, to refresh my memory.
Would it be significant to you if you saw that?
I would have to see what it said. It depends on what it said and how it said it and what they had done. So it could be.
And a classic example of someone who is truly legally insane would be a father who kills their daughter because they're hearing voices that their daughter is the devil. Feel like they have no choice but to kill their own daughter. And so they kill their daughter. Does that sound like something that might fit legal insanity?
It's your concept of one possible type of insanity.
Well, what's your concept? Does that seem?
There are many different
Well, let's
concepts.
just stick to this hypothetical.
Yeah.
Does it, yes or no? Does it fit your concept?
What does she think he's asking her? Like, she's really being really guarded. The answer is yes. And you don't even have to be a psychiatrist to know that. The issue here is whether Letecia Letecia's condition, if she has one at all, rises to the level of legal insanity.
You could have given another story and I would have agreed with it or whatever. Sure, it's a possibility.
Okay, I'll take the possibility.
Okay.
In that circumstances, they wouldn't know the capacity to appreciate the wrongfulness of their act because they had a psychosis that something was telling them that their daughter was the devil. Follow me?
If you believe that, yes.
How do you believe that?
In a hypothetical story, I believe that you are giving an example of something. No, I don't believe that happened, but I certainly believe it's one of your concepts of what a psychotic episode can.
This is really condescending. This is not a discussion, after work for drinks between a lawyer and a psychiatrist talking about each other's professions. This is court testimony, and she knows darn well he's trying to go somewhere. And this has become, or it seems to have become, a little bit personal. I don't know.
Can be like. And
No.
I'll buy that could be one. Sure. How about before? Before any of this happened, what were you feeling? What were you thinking? How describe that? How about during? Do you remember everything that happened then? Were you told that you did something you don't remember? And how about afterwards? How did you feel? Did you have a headache? Did you throw up? Did you, did you feel unwell?
Letecia said she was throwing up, and I can't remember whether it was before or after she had an interview with Dr. Lewis. And I don't know if Dr. Lewis asked the question of her. Well, that's interesting.
Well, so that before, during, and after is a very, very important sequence. And you would ask it not just in terms of, quote, sanity, but in terms of neurologic impairment and how that affects brain function.
Well, you consider anyone who commits murder to have neurological development issues, don't you?
I'm sorry, say that again?
You consider anyone who commits murder to have neurological issues.
I don't recall ever saying that. Did I give you that impression?
Said it on the HBO documentary. We're saying it there.
Oh.
What would you quote this? I'm not aware of.
Well, let me rephrase. Do you think anyone who commits murder has a brain injury?
No,
Do you think when you're evaluating someone for insanity and you're asking them these questions that you just talked about, what they thought before, during, and after the crime, that would be important to go back and look at the evidence to see if it's consistent with what they're saying?
any data that you could get that
Did you see that? She just gave a one shoulder shrug. It's not that she doesn't know, it's that she doesn't want to say. Interesting.
elaborates on what happened is valuable. I can't say how or what, but of course, anything. Even something where weeks before something could have happened. So that, sure, anything that you can learn about the act before, during, after, and at any time before, during, after is important.
The night before this crime, this murder, on January 26, 2020, the defendant had a video recording of her and Gannon talking about the fire. You recall seeing that?
No,
Think that would be important to look at? What she's saying the night before the murder?
I would have to see it, sir. I can't, I need to look at it and then I'll say, yes, I think it is important or whatever, but
Is it that she just chose not to look? Did she not review every single, sorry, Watson scratching in the background. Did she not review every single bit of information that she could get her hands on? How could she not have seen this? Unless she didn't know it existed and she didn't have it, but that wouldn't make any sense. Wow. This is the whole thing is bizarre.
I don't recall it.
Not a problem. We don't have one. We can't play it. Did you not remember looking at that as part of your evaluation?
I'm sorry, I do not recall exactly that. Also, some of what I saw was unclear and the sound was not good, so that I can't be certain of that.
Well, let me describe it to you and see what your thoughts are, okay? So she's, first of all, video recording a conversation she's having with her stepson, who's 11 years old, saying things like, it's okay, we can sell the couch, not a problem. We can sell the couch and fix it. And Gannon says, I'm just worried about my burns, and he's crying. Then she says, it's okay tomorrow, and then she shuts the video off. Okay? Remember seeing anything like that?
I'm sorry, I don't recall it, but again, much of what I saw was not clear, the sound was not good, and I am not aware of having seen that exact.
I don't think anybody who saw that video or heard him say that, I don't think anybody could forget that.
Exactly. I am aware of having read that that Gannon, that she said he had little bubbles on his arm. So that's the part of that I'm assuming it's the same issue. That is the part that stayed with me.
Well, what about the part of her having the ability to stop the video after Gannon says, I had burns?
I'm not sure what that would mean. What would you have me agree to?
Well, do you think that would be evidence that she didn't want anyone to know that Gannon had burns?
I can't say. I'm not aware of that because she did say that he had little bubbles on his arm. If she didn't want anyone to know that, I don't know why she would have said that.
Okay.
Because she was caught, because she couldn't avoid saying that, because Harley knew and Lena knew. She couldn't get out of admitting that. That's why.